Picture a line of white trucks turning off the busy Sapel to Wari road. Each one carried the green and silver badge of a big oil company on its door. One after another, they rolled through a fresh coat of paint and a bright new signboard into a workshop that had been rebuilt from nothing. Cameras from the local television station followed them in, and across the road, outside a tall glass tower with its doors chained shut, a woman stood alone in heavy gold and imported lace, watching it all on a small screen in a shop window. Her white Range Rover was gone. Her driver was gone. The tower behind her had her name on it, but the bank had taken the keys. She had bulldozed that mechanic's little plank shed with her own councilmen on live television, while the whole town watched and laughed with her. Now the whole town was watching again, and this time no one was laughing with her. How did a roadside nobody with greasy hands bring down an entire empire built on concrete and gold? Stay with us, because this story turns in a way you will not expect. Now, let the story begin. To understand how that woman came to be standing alone outside her own dead tower, we must go back 4 months. Back to a plank shed off the Sapel to Wari road and a white Range Rover with a flat battery. It was early morning in the city of Sapel, in Delta State. The sun had barely climbed over the tank farms by the river when the road already began to fill. Tankers rumbled toward Wari. Traders pushed wheelbarrows to the market. Okada riders wove between the potholes, calling for passengers. And in a small plank shed at the edge of the road, a young man named Ogenero Tano was already bent over an open bonnet, a torch held between his teeth. Everyone called him Nero. He was 30 years old, tall and lean, with quiet eyes and hands that were always stained black at the knuckles, no matter how hard he scrubbed them. His shed was nothing to look at. It was built of old planks and roofing sheets, held up by poles his late father had planted years ago. A faded cardboard sign nailed above the door read, "In careful hand paint, Tano Auto-Electrics." Inside, there were 2 wooden benches, a rack of tools worn smooth from use, an old battery charger, and a cracked stool where customers sat while they waited. But if the shed was poor, the man inside it was gifted. Nero could listen to an engine the way a doctor listens to a chest. He could tell you which wire was tired, which sensor was lying, which part was about to fail before it failed. Drivers came from far to sit on that cracked stool, because when everyone else gave up on a car, Nero found the fault. That morning, he finished the job he was on, wiped his hands on a rag, and reached under the bench for a small tin. It had once held powdered milk. Now it held his savings. He opened it, counted the folded notes inside, and let out a slow breath. "Still far," he said quietly to himself. "Still very far." The certification he wanted cost 185,000 naira. It was a proper diagnostic certificate, the kind that let a man service the new computer engines, the hybrid ones, the vehicles that ran on both fuel and battery. Nobody in the whole state held that paper. Nero had taught himself most of the work already, borrowing manuals, watching videos on a cracked phone late into the night. But without the certificate, the big companies would not put their names on a contract with him. He had counted 71,000 naira in the tin. He needed more than twice that again. He closed the tin and pushed it back under the bench. Then he glanced at the corner where a thin mattress lay rolled against the wall. His mother slept there some nights when her chest was bad and she did not want to be alone in the house. She was 68 now, and the cough that came in the harmattan never fully left her anymore. Her drugs cost money too. Everything cost money, and so the tin filled slowly, one careful note at a time. "Nero!" a voice called from the road. "Nero, are you inside?" He stepped out, blinking in the light. A heavy man in an oil company polo shirt was climbing down from a big pickup truck. Behind the pickup, on a low loader, sat a strange silver van that hummed even with its engine off. Nero knew the man. It was Mr. Akpos Ovwata, the fleet manager for Delta Crest Energy, the oil servicing company with the big yard on the Wari road. "Good morning, sir," Nero said, wiping his hand before offering it. "Morning, morning," Akpos said, gripping it firmly. He nodded back at the humming van. This one is troubling me again. The workshop in Warri opened it, closed it, opened it again, and still it does the same thing. Battery light comes on, and the whole thing goes to sleep on the road. 3 of my drivers have refused to drive it. Nero walks slowly around the van, running one finger along its seams, listening to the low electric hum. It is the new type, he said. The one that carries both engine and battery. That is why I came to you, Akpos said. He lowered his voice, even though there was no one to hear. I will be honest with you, my brother. The big workshops have all the fine equipment, but they do not understand these new engines. Only this boy reads them. That is what I tell my Oga. I have 4 of these vans now, and by next year we are getting a whole fleet of them, 20, 30, more, and nobody in this state can touch them except you. Nero said nothing. He had heard such praise before, and praise did not fill a milk tin. He only nodded and said, "Leave it. Come back in the evening." That evening, when Akpos returned, the van no longer hummed with a sick sound. Nero had found a swollen wire behind the battery pack, a wire the big workshop had never thought to check. He had cleaned it, replaced a small burnt part, and reset the whole system with his cracked phone plugged into a port under the dashboard. Akpos started the van, drove it up and down the road twice, and came back grinning. "You see?" he said. "You see what I mean?" He pressed some folded notes into Nero's palm, more than Nero would have asked for. "Keep it. And keep that phone charged. One day, this town will know your name." Nero laughed softly. "In this town, sir, they know my hands, not my name. As long as the car works, nobody asks who fixed it." He did not know how true that was about to become. He did not know that not far away, in a gated estate on the good side of Sapel, a woman was already looking at his little shed on a map and seeing not a workshop, but a piece of land in her way. Her name was Chief Mrs. Gloria Emico, and she was about to walk into his life like a storm. Chief Mrs. Gloria Emico was new money, and she wore it the way a child wears a new pair of shoes, showing it to everyone whether they asked to see it or not. 10 years before, nobody in Sapel had known her name. Now she owned 3 petrol stations, a block of shops near the market, and a duplex in the newest gated estate, with a paved forecourt and cut grass behind a high white wall. Cool air conditioning hummed in her sitting room while the street outside ran on generators. She had a white Range Rover with a personal driver named Mudiaga, who opened her door before the car had fully stopped and closed it again without being told. She wore heavy gold on her neck and wrists and imported lace that cost more than Nero made in 3 months. And now she was building a tower. It was to be called Emico Grand Plaza, a great structure of glass and steel, 4 floors of shops and offices rising right there on the Sapel to Warri road. She had borrowed heavily for it, 400 million naira from the bank, with her petrol stations and her duplex signed as security. She told everyone who would listen that the plaza would make her the richest woman in the whole of Delta State. She had already done the mathematics in her head, and in her head she had already won. But there was one small problem, and the small problem was Nero's shed. The tower was going up right behind his plank workshop, and Gloria had decided that the frontage where his shed sat, the strip of ground facing the main road, was the most valuable part of all. That was where she wanted her grand entrance, her fountain, her big illuminated sign. A dirty little mechanic shed could not stand in front of Emico Grand Plaza. It simply could not. What made it worse, though Nero did not know it yet, was that Gloria and Nero had met before. It had been about a year earlier, on a rainy night. Gloria's white Range Rover had died on the Warri road, in the dark, with the rain coming down in sheets. Her driver, Mudiaga, had tried everything and failed. Every big workshop was closed. It was Nero, walking home late from his shed, who had found them stranded, water rising around the tires. He had opened the bonnet in the rain, torch in his teeth, and worked for almost an hour. He found the fault in the alarm system that had killed the whole car, cleaned it, bridged it, and brought the great machine back to life. Gloria had sat inside the whole time, dry and warm, watching him get soaked through his only good shirt. When the engine finally roared, she had wound down her window just a small crack. "How much?" she had asked. Nero had wiped the rain from his face. "Anything you feel is fair, madam. It is late. I am only glad you can get home safe." She had reached into her bag, pulled out one note, and pushed it through the crack. 5,000 naira. For an hour in the rain, for saving a car worth more than his shed, his tools, and his father's poles all put together. Then she had wound the window up and told Mudiaga to drive, and the Range Rover had splashed away into the dark, leaving Nero standing in the road, soaked, holding a single note. He had not complained. He had gone home, hung his shirt to dry, and forgotten about the proud woman in the big car. But over the following year, Gloria's cars had come to his shed again and again, sent by Mudiaga, who trusted no one else with them. Nero had serviced her Range Rover, her Hilux, the small car her sister drove. He had replaced batteries, chased electrical faults, sat up late to have a vehicle ready by morning. And each time, the payment was slow, or short, or simply never came at all. By the time the tower began to rise, Chief Mrs. Gloria Emiko owed Ogenero Tano 240,000 naira for work done over more than a year. It was written in the back of his exercise book, in his own careful hand, date by date. It was more than enough to finish his certification. He had asked Mudiaga about it, gently, more than once. Mudiaga always looked away and said, "Madame will settle it. You know Madame is a big woman. Be patient." Nero was patient. Patience was the only wealth he had plenty of. Then came the day of the groundbreaking. The company doing the tower had finished the foundation, and Gloria wanted a ceremony. Not a small one. She wanted cameras. She invited the local television station, the one everyone in Sapel watched in the evenings. She invited councilmen, a pastor, a few chiefs, and a crowd of onlookers who gathered simply because something was happening. She set up a canopy, white plastic chairs, and a table with a big model of the finished plaza on it, all glass and little plastic trees. It was 10 in the morning when the white Range Rover pulled up. Mudiaga came around and opened the door, and Chief Mrs. Gloria Emiko stepped out into the sun in fresh gold and blue lace, a gele tied high on her head. The crowd clapped. The camera turned, and she smiled the smile of a woman who believed the whole world had finally arranged itself around her. She walked to the microphone. "My people of Sapele," she began, her voice sweet and loud, "today is a great day. Where you are standing, a monument will rise. Emiko Grand Plaza, the finest building this road has ever seen." The crowd cheered. She lifted the little plastic model for the camera. "Shops downstairs. Offices upstairs. Big companies will rent here. Even the oil companies will come and beg me for space. Everything you see, I built with my own 2 hands. Then her eyes moved sideways to the little plank shed at the edge of the ground, with its faded cardboard sign. And her smile changed. Nero was inside. He had heard the noise and come to the door, a spanner still in his hand, watching quietly. He had known the tower was coming. He had not known it would come for him today. Gloria pointed at the shed with one gold-heavy hand, and she laughed into the microphone. "But look at this," she said. "Look at this eyesore. This dirty thing standing in front of my beautiful plaza. How can a rat's nest stand in front of gold?" The crowd turned. The camera turned with them, fixing on Nero in the doorway in his stained overalls. "You," Gloria said, and now she was speaking to him directly, her voice carrying across the whole ground. "Roadside rat. This land is needed today. Pack your rubbish and go." Nero stepped forward, calm, though something tightened in his chest. "Good morning, madam," he said. "This shed has stood here for many years. My father built it before me. If the land is truly needed, there is a process. There is time. Give me a few days, and I will find another place." "A few days?" Gloria laughed again, and the crowd laughed with her because she was the big woman and he was the man with grease on his hands. "Do I look like somebody who has a few days? Today my ceremony is holding. Today." You think the whole of Sapel will wait for one dirty mechanic and his firewood shed? Madame, Nero said, and his voice stayed even, I am not asking for much, only that you do not throw away a man's living in one morning. And there is another matter. You still owe me 240,000 naira for your vehicles. I have kept every date. If you would settle even part of that, I can start again somewhere else, and I will trouble you no more. For a moment the crowd went quiet, and the camera came in close. It was a fair thing he had said, and everyone heard it. But Gloria's face went hard. Owe you? She said. I owe you. A woman like me owe a roadside rat? Did I sign anything with you? Where is your paper? You people are all the same. You do small work and you want to eat a big woman's money. She turned to the crowd and spread her hands as if he had insulted her. You see them? Give them your car to touch, and tomorrow they will claim you owe them the whole world. Then she turned to the side of the canopy, where 3 councilmen in dusty uniforms had been standing all along, and beside them a yellow bulldozer with its engine already warm. Nero's heart went cold. Madam, please, he said quickly. At least let me carry out my tools, my machines. Give me 1 hour. 1 hour? She snapped her gold-heavy fingers. You have 0 hours. Clear it now. The bulldozer coughed and roared. The crowd pulled back with a great murmur. And on live television, with the camera drinking in every second, the yellow machine lowered its blade and drove straight into Nero's shed. The old planks his father had planted screamed as they broke. The roofing sheets folded like paper. The 2 benches shattered. The battery charger, the rack of tools, the cracked stool, everything Nero owned in the world, was pushed into a heap of splinters and twisted metal in less than 3 minutes. Dust rose into the bright morning air. The faded cardboard sign that read, Tano Auto-Electrics, disappeared under the rubble. Nero did not shout. He did not rush at the machine. He stood at the edge of the wreckage of his whole life, his fists closed at his sides, his jaw tight, and he watched in silence. That silence was louder than any scream. Some in the crowd looked away, ashamed, though they said nothing. When the blade finally lifted, Nero walked slowly into the broken heap. He crouched down and began to dig with his bare hands through the splinters and the twisted sheets. People thought he was searching for money, or for something valuable. He was not. He was searching for one thing only. A heavy steel spanner, old and worn smooth, the first tool his father had ever owned, the one he had learned on as a boy. He found it under a broken bench, pulled it free, wiped the dust from it with his thumb, and held it against his chest like a man holding the hand of someone he had lost. Gloria watched him and laughed once more into the microphone. See him, she said, digging in rubbish for rubbish. This is why some people will remain poor forever. Mudiaga, bring my chair to the front. Let us start the real ceremony. But not everyone was laughing. A woman came pushing through the crowd, a broad woman in a wrapper and a food seller's apron, with flour still on her hands. It was Mama Ese, who sold rice and beans from a bench across the road, and had fed Nero on the days his tin was too thin to touch. She planted herself between Nero and the canopy and pointed a floury finger at Gloria. You have done a bad thing today, Mama Ese said, and her voice shook with anger. This boy, this quiet boy, has helped everybody on this road. When my son's motorcycle died and I had no money, he fixed it and took nothing. When your own car died in the rain, madam, was it not this same boy who saved you? And this is how you thank a person? You break his shed and insult his father in front of the whole world? The crowd went quiet again. The camera turned to Mama Ese, then back to Gloria. Gloria's face twisted. Who is this market woman? She said. Who invited Beanseller to my ceremony? Security. Remove her. Remove both of them. This is private property now. 2 of the councilmen moved forward. Mama Ese was pushed back, still shouting. Nero touched her arm gently. Leave it, Mama, he said softly. Leave it, it is finished. Let us go. He put one arm around the older woman, his father's spanner in his other hand, and he walked away from the ruin of his shed, through the crowd, his back straight and his eyes forward. He did not look back at Gloria. He did not curse her. He simply walked. And the camera followed him until he turned the corner and was gone. That evening, the clip played on the local news. Sapel watched the big woman break the small man's shed and laugh. Some people laughed along. Others shook their heads. And Gloria, sitting in her cool sitting room with her feet up, watched herself on television and was well pleased, because to her, being feared and being respected were the same thing. She had no idea that she had just picked the worst enemy in the whole of Delta State. Not because Nero would fight her. He would never fight her. But because of what those grease-stained hands could do, and what they could not. That night, Nero did not go straight home. He walked the long way, along the quiet back road by the river, because he did not want his mother to see his face before he had fixed it. He sat for a while on a broken culvert in the dark, the steel spanner across his knees, and he let himself feel the whole weight of the day. He had lost his shed. He had lost his tools. He had lost the 240,000 naira, which was gone now, he was sure. Gone the way everything he was owed always went. His savings tin, which he had grabbed from under the bench and carried out that morning, held its 71,000 naira and nothing more. And even that would soon go into his mother's drugs and their food, because a man cannot eat a milk tin's promise. He did not cry. He had learned long ago that crying did not charge a battery or fix a wire. But he sat there a long time in the dark, and when he finally stood, his shoulders were heavy. It was on that same walk home that the last thing he expected happened. Near the junction where the tarred road met the mud, a small car sat with its bonnet up and its hazard lights blinking weakly. A woman stood beside it with a baby tied on her back, close to tears, while two men she did not know circled the car in the dark, offering to help in a way that did not look like help at all. Nero saw it, and tired as he was, ruined as he was, he could not walk past. "Madame," he called, coming into the light of the blinking hazards. "What is wrong with it?" "It just stopped," she said, her voice shaking. "It stopped, and it will not start. And these men, they are asking me for money to push it, but I do not know them, and I am afraid." Nero looked at the two men, and the two men looked at the spanner in his hand, and they decided to find business elsewhere. Then he opened the bonnet, took the small torch from his pocket, and bent over the engine. On the very day his own workshop had been crushed to splinters, Ogenero Tano fixed a stranger's car for free in the dark by the roadside. A loose terminal on the battery. 2 minutes of work. The car started, and the woman almost wept with relief. "How much, sir? Please, let me pay you something." "No, madam," Nero said, closing the bonnet gently. "Keep it for the baby. Just drive home safe." And he stepped back into the dark and continued on his way. He did not know it, but a man had watched that whole thing from a car parked nearby and would remember it. When he got home, his mother was awake, sitting up on her mattress, coughing softly. She had heard. This was Sapel. Everybody had heard. "They told me," she said, her eyes wet in the lamplight. "They told me what that woman did to your father's shed. Oh, my son." Nero knelt beside her and took her thin hands in his greasy ones. "It is only wood and iron, Mama," he said. "Wood can be cut again. Iron can be beaten again. As long as your son still has his eyes and his hands, we will not die." He held up the old steel spanner and smiled at her. "See? I still have Papa's spanner. Everything else is small." His mother put her hand on his cheek. "You are a good boy," she whispered. "God is not asleep. God sees the greasy hands that the proud ones despise. God sees them." She began to cough again, and Nero held her until it passed. That night he lay awake on the floor beside her mattress, staring at the roofing sheets above him, and he made a quiet decision. He would not beg Gloria. He would not fight her. He would simply start again, one wire at a time, from nothing. As his father had started. As his father's father had started. He did not know that starting again was closer than he thought. Because the very same week that his shed was flattened, something arrived for him. A sealed envelope, cream-colored and heavy, with the green and silver badge of Delta Crest Energy printed in the corner. It came from the contracts office of the oil company, carried by a dispatch rider who did not know the shed was gone. The rider found only a heap of splinters and a bulldozer's tracks. He asked Mama Ese across the road, and Mama Ese, wiping her hands, took the envelope and kept it safe until Nero came to buy his morning food. "They brought this for you," she said, pressing it into his hands. "From the oil company. Big envelope, big paper inside. I can feel it. Open it, open it." Nero broke the seal with his thumb and unfolded the letter inside. He read it once. Then he read it again, slowly, as if the words might change. Then he sat down on Mama Ese's bench, very still, the letter trembling slightly in his hand. "What is it?" Mama Ese said. "Is it good or bad? Talk to me, my son. My heart is doing gbim gbim." "It is an invitation," Nero said quietly, "from Delta Crest Energy. They are giving out a big contract, a contract to service and maintain their whole new fleet. All the new hybrid vehicles, the ones nobody else can touch, and a workshop premises to run it from." He looked up at her, and his eyes were wide. "Mama Ise, they have invited me to submit. Me. They want me to bid for it, and to come to the awards ceremony." Mama Ese let out a shout that turned heads all along the road, then clapped her flowery hands together. "You see?" she cried. "You see what I told you? God is not asleep! God is not asleep!" But Nero was not shouting. He was thinking. Because a bid needed papers, and a contract to service those new engines needed a certificate. The very certificate he had been saving for, 185,000 naira, of which he had only 71,000 in a milk tin. Without that paper, the invitation was just a beautiful letter. It would go to whoever had the certificate, and the reach, and the money. And in Sapele, everyone knew who had money and reach. Everyone knew about Amico Grand Plaza. For while Nero read his letter on a food seller's bench, Chief Mrs. Gloria Amico was standing under her new tower giving an interview to that same local television station and boasting to the whole of Sapele about the very same contract. "Let me tell you why Amico Grand Plaza will be the greatest building on this road," she said into the microphone, gold flashing at her throat. "Delta Crest Energy, the oil company, they are looking for a premises and a fleet contract. A big, big contract. And where do you think they will bring it? Here, to me. My plaza will have the workshop, the offices, everything they need, all in one place. I have already told the bank, do not worry about my loan. The oil money is coming. Everything I have, my stations, my houses, everything is riding on this plaza and this contract, and I never lose. Gloria Amico never loses." She laughed, her big laugh for the camera. Behind her, the half-built tower stood against the sky, glass catching the sun, 400 million naira of borrowed concrete balanced on one contract she was sure was already hers. She had staked her whole empire on winning that contract, and she had just bulldozed the one man in the entire state who could actually do the work the contract required. Little did she know. Little did she know at all. 2 days after the shed came down, Mr. Akpos Ovwata drove his pickup along the Sapele to Wari Road with one of his troublesome vans acting up again, heading for Nero's shed as he always did. He slowed at the spot, then stopped, then climbed down and stood staring. Where the plank workshop had been, there was only churned earth, a heap of splinters being carried away by hand, and the beginnings of a fence for Amico Grand Plaza. "Where is the shed?" he asked a passing Okada man. "Where is Nero, the mechanic that was here?" "Ah, Oga, you did not hear?" the Okada man said. "Chief Mrs. Amico brought a bulldozer. She scattered the whole place. It was on television. She said the boy was a rat, spoiling her view." Akpos stood very still. He was a quiet man, a company man, not given to shouting. But something moved in his face that had not been there before. He got back into his pickup, but he did not drive to any big workshop. He drove to Mama Ese's bench, because in Sapele, Mama Ese knew where everybody was. and he sat down and he asked her to send for Nero. When Nero came, Akpos looked at him for a long moment. "I saw what she did," he said. "The whole company saw it. I want you to know something. For 4 years, whenever one of those new vehicles has broken down and the big workshops with all their fine equipment have failed, it is you I have brought it to. It is you who has never once failed me. My managers know your work, even if they have never known your face." He leaned forward. "Nero, that contract letter, did you receive it?" "I received it," Nero said. "But, sir, I cannot bid. To touch those engines under a company contract, a man needs the diagnostic certificate. I have been saving for it for 2 years. I am not even halfway. And now, with the shed gone, my savings must feed my mother." He said it plainly, without self-pity. It was simply the truth. Akpos nodded slowly, as if he had expected exactly this answer, and it had told him what he needed to know. "Come with me tomorrow," he said, "to the company. There is someone who wants to meet you." The next morning, Nero put on his one good shirt, the same one that had dried stiff after the rain a year before, and he rode with Akpos to the Delta Crest Energy Yard on the Warri Road. It was a place of high gates and cool offices, of vehicles lined up in neat rows, of men in green polos who said "sir" and stepped back. Nero had serviced half the vans in that yard without ever being allowed past the gate. Now the gate opened for him. They took him up to a cool office on the top floor, and behind the desk sat a man Nero did not expect to see. It was the same man he had glimpsed, only for a second, in a parked car, on the night he had fixed the frightened woman's engine for free by the roadside. He was one of the directors of Delta Crest Energy, a senior man, and he had been sitting in that car that night watching, because the frightened woman with the baby was his own junior sister, and he had wanted to see what the roadside mechanic would do before he stepped out to thank him. He had watched Nero fix the car and take nothing, and drive no bargain, and he had said nothing, and simply remembered. "Sit down, Mr. Tano," the director said. "I have been hearing your name for 4 years from Akpos here, and 2 weeks ago, without knowing who you were, I watched you help a stranded woman on the road at night and refuse her money. That woman was my sister." He folded his hands on the desk. "Then, a few days later, I watched a woman on television destroy your workshop and laugh at you, and I made a decision." He slid a paper across the desk. "The company is going to sponsor your certification. In full. 185,000 naira, paid directly to the certification board. Not as a gift, as an investment. Because we are buying 26 new hybrid vehicles this year and 30 more next year, and there is exactly one man in this state who can keep them running, and he has been fixing them from a plank shed for 4 years while we paid the big workshops to fail. You will get certified. Then you will bid for the contract, on merit, like anyone else. What you do after that is up to your hands. Is that fair?" Nero could not speak for a moment. His throat had closed. He thought of the milk tin under the bench, of the 2 years of folded notes, of the nights over a cracked phone. "It is fair, sir," he managed at last. "More than fair. Thank you." "Do not thank me," the director said, and there was the smallest smile at the corner of his mouth. "Thank the woman who tore your shed down and put your face on television across the whole of Delta State. She has done more to build your name than any advertisement I could buy." Nero sat the certification examination 3 weeks later. It was hard, but it was made of the very things his hands already knew, the wires and sensors and battery packs he had lived among his whole life. He passed at the top of everyone who sat it that season, and a fresh certificate came to him with his full name printed on it, Ogenero Tano, Certified Diagnostic and Hybrid Systems Technician. With Akpos to guide him through the paperwork, he submitted his bid for the Delta Crest contract. His bid was small and honest. He asked only for what the work truly cost, plus a fair wage for himself and 2 apprentices he planned to hire. He put down a modest piece of rented ground for the workshop, further along the road, and a plan to rebuild simply and well. Meanwhile, Amico Grand Plaza had also submitted a bid, and Gloria's bid was a very different thing. Because Gloria had no technician. She had never had one. Her plan was to win the contract on the strength of her big tower and her big name, and then to hire cheap hands to do the actual work, taking the difference as profit. Her bid was padded from top to bottom, the prices inflated, the timelines fat, the numbers built to squeeze the oil company for every naira. And when Akpos and the company's engineers sat down to compare the two bids, the difference was so plain that it hardly needed discussing. One bid came from people who could not tell a hybrid battery pack from a fuel tank and cost a fortune. The other came from the one man who had quietly kept their whole fleet alive for 4 years and cost a fraction as much. The decision was made in a cool boardroom weeks before the ceremony. But nobody told Gloria. And Gloria, sure as ever that she never lost, went on borrowing against a contract she had already lost, adding a 5th floor to her tower and ordering a fountain from abroad. The bank was watching too. They had lent her 400 million naira on the promise of that oil contract, and they had begun to hear whispers. The day of the contract award ceremony came bright and hot. Delta Crest Energy held it at their own yard on the Wari Road, under a great canopy, with rows of chairs, a long table for the directors, and the local television station there to broadcast it live, because a contract of that size was news across the whole state. The same cameras that had filmed Gloria breaking a plank shed now filmed the award of the very contract she had staked her empire upon. Gloria came in her white Range Rover, in fresh gold and green lace, with Mudiaga opening her door and her aide, Miss Ufuoma, walking 2 steps behind, carrying her bag. She swept into the front row as if the ceremony were her own coronation. She had brought no technician, no engineer, only herself and her certainty. She smiled at the cameras. She waved at the crowd. She was already composing, in her head, the speech she would give when they called Emiko Grand Plaza. She did not notice the quiet man in a clean but simple shirt sitting further back, with a food seller in her best wrapper beside him. She did not look twice at Ogenero Tano. Why would she? To her, he was rubbish she had already swept away. The company director rose to speak. The crowd hushed. The camera fixed on him. "Thank you all for coming," he said. "Delta Crest Energy is entering a new age. Our fleet is changing. The old engines are going, and the new hybrid vehicles are coming. And they are not like the vehicles of before. They are computers on wheels. They need hands that understand them. For years, we spent millions paying big workshops to service our difficult vehicles, and for years those big workshops failed us, and our vans slept on the road." He paused. "And for years, quietly, one man fixed what no one else could, from a plank shed on this same road. Without a certificate, without a fine office, without a name any of us knew. He never once failed us. 2 months ago, that man's workshop was destroyed, on live television, by someone who called him a rat." A murmur ran through the crowd. Gloria's smile did not move, but something behind her eyes flickered. "We do not award contracts to towers," the director went on. "We do not award them to gold, or to loud names, or to concrete. We award them to the hands that can do the work. So today, the premises and fleet maintenance contract of Delta Crest Energy is awarded to a newly certified outfit that this company will stake its vehicles on. It is awarded to Tano Auto-Electrics, to Mr. Ogenero Tano." For one long second, there was no sound at all. Then the crowd erupted, and every camera swung, not to Gloria in the front row, but to the quiet man rising from his chair near the back, with a food seller weeping and clapping beside him and an old steel spanner in his breast pocket. Gloria sat frozen in her seat. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Her eyes went from the director to the crowd to the man now walking to the front, and slowly, terribly, her mind put the face together. The clean shirt, the quiet eyes. The rat. It was the rat. It was the mechanic whose shed she had crushed, whose money she had refused, whom she had laughed at on this very same television station. And they were handing him the contract her whole empire was standing on. "No," she said, but her voice was small now, lost under the clapping. "No, "No, there is a mistake. This is my contract. Amico Grand Plaza. Where is my name? Where is my name?" But nobody was listening to her. The director had asked Mr. Akpos Ovwata to come and say a few words, and the fleet manager stood up, and the cameras turned to him, and what he said was carried live into every sitting room in Sapele. "I have managed this fleet for 11 years, Akpos said. "I want the whole town to hear this from my own mouth. This man behind me, Nero Tano, has kept our vehicles alive for 4 years, from a plank shed, taking honest pay, never once cheating us, never once failing us. Meanwhile, the bid that came in from Amico Grand Plaza had no technician on it at all, not one qualified hand. Only inflated prices, padded from top to bottom, built to squeeze this company for money it did not need to spend." We compared the two bids side by side. It was not a hard choice. It was the easiest choice I have made in 11 years. He turned and looked directly at Gloria in the front row. "You do not build an oil fleet on gold and noise, madame. You build it on the greasy hands you despise." The crowd roared, and on the far side of the yard, the great gates rolled open, and the answer to the whole story drove in. One after another, they came. Brand new white vans, 26 of them, each carrying the green and silver badge of Delta Crest Energy gleaming in the sun. They rolled in a slow line across the yard, past the canopy, past the frozen woman in the front row, and turned in through a fresh-painted archway to a workshop that had been quietly rebuilt over the past weeks. Not a plank shed now. A proper block workshop, with roller doors, a tiled bay, a charging station for the hybrid batteries, and above it all a bright new signboard that read, in bold, clean letters, "Tano Auto Electrics, Certified Hybrid Systems." Live on local television, the oil company's whole new fleet rolled into the rebuilt workshop of the man Gloria Amico had bulldozed, and the cameras drank in every gleaming second. Nero stood at the mouth of his new workshop as the vans came in, and for the first time that day, his composure broke. Just a little. He reached up and touched the signboard with his father's spanner, and his eyes filled. Mama Ese was openly weeping now, shouting to the sky, "God is not asleep! I told you! God is not asleep!" Somewhere in the crowd, Nero's mother, brought there in a company car, sat with her hands pressed to her mouth, watching her son on the television screens and in the flesh at the same time, unable to believe that the boy who had knelt beside her mattress and shown her his father's spanner was now the man the whole town was clapping for. And Chief Mrs. Gloria Amico sat alone in the front row, while everyone around her stood and cheered a man she had called a rat. The fall came quickly after that, the way a wall falls once the last block is pulled. The bank had lent Gloria 400 million naira on one promise, and one promise only, that the oil contract was as good as hers. Their officers had sat in that same crowd. They had heard the director. They had heard Akpos. They had watched the fleet roll into another man's workshop live on television. By the next morning, the phones in the bank were ringing, and by the afternoon, the men in dark suits were on the Wari Road, walking through the half-built tower with clipboards and cold faces. Amico Grand Plaza had no tenant now, no oil contract, no income to service, a debt that grew heavier every single day. The fifth-floor Gloria had added on borrowed hope stood open to the sky, its steel rods rusting in the rain. The fountain she had ordered from abroad sat in its crate, never opened. And the security she had signed against the loan, her 3 petrol stations and her fine duplex in the gated estate, all of it, one by one, the bank took. They took the petrol stations first. Then they took the block of shops near the market. Then they came for the duplex with the paved forecourt and the cut grass, and Gloria stood on her own front step in her gold and her lace while men she could not bribe changed the locks. Mudiaga the driver found other work, because a driver must eat, and a woman with no car needs no driver. Miss Ufuma the aide packed her things quietly and was gone. The white Range Rover, the one Nero had once saved in the rain for 5,000 naira, was loaded onto a low loader and carried away to be sold. The cool air conditioning went silent. The gate that had opened before her car now opened for strangers, And the tower itself, Emiko Gran Plaza, the great glass and steel monument she had built right on top of a poor man's shed, was seized by the bank, and its doors were chained shut, a dead thing of concrete standing over the very ground where a plank workshop had once hummed with honest work. In the space of a few months, Chief Mrs. Gloria Emiko had gone from the woman who never lost to a woman with nothing left but the clothes she wore and a name that made people shake their heads. Nero, for his part, did not gloat. It was not in him. His workshop grew. The 2 apprentices he had planned to hire became 6, then 10, young men from the road who learned under his patient hands the way he had once learned under his father's. The Delta Crest fleet came in for service and went out running true. Other companies, seeing the oil giant trust him, brought their vehicles too. He moved his mother into a small, clean house with a proper bed and a fan for her chest, and her cough grew quieter, and she lived to sit outside his workshop in the evenings and watch the vans come and go. He kept his father's steel spanner in a glass case on the office wall, above the same faded cardboard sign he had dug out of the rubble, and when new apprentices asked him why he kept such old and broken things, he would say, "Because they remind me who I am and who lifted me," and it was not gold. He never sent for Gloria. He never gloated at her, never sent a word to shame her. He simply built, quietly, the way he had always built. Then came a certain evening, some months later. The road outside Nero's workshop had been dug up and repaved, and to celebrate, the whole street had gathered for the grand opening of the extended workshop, with music and jollof rice from Mama Isa's big pots, and the local television station there once more, because Tano Auto-Electrics was a name the whole town now knew. Fairy lights hung along the new signboard. The fleet stood polished in the bays. Children danced. Mama Ese served rice to anyone who came, laughing, telling everyone for the 100th time that she had known God was not asleep. And across the road, in the shadow of the dead tower with its chained doors, a woman stood alone. She wore the same green lace, faded now and no longer fresh, and one thin gold bangle, the last she had not sold. There was no Range Rover behind her, no driver, no aide. She stood at a small kiosk window where an old television flickered, and on that television she watched, live, the grand opening of the workshop of the man she had called a rat. She watched the lights, and the fleet, and the crowd, and Nero himself cutting a ribbon while the town cheered his name. She watched from the outside, through a shop window, the way he had once watched his own life pushed into a heap of splinters. She did not speak. She had no speech left. There was nothing to say and no one to say it to. She simply stood in the dark, alone, and watched the greasy hands she had despised open the door to everything she had lost. Then she turned and walked away down the Warri Road, and the crowd across the street did not even notice she had come. Dear friends, thank you for staying with this story to the very end. This story teaches us one simple, powerful lesson. Never despise the small, greasy hands that fix what your money cannot buy. A person's worth is not in their clothes, or their car, or the height of the tower they build. It is in what they can do, and in how they treat others when they have every reason to be cruel. Gloria had gold, and land, and a great glass tower, but she had no respect in her heart, and in the end all her concrete could not save her. Nero had only worn tools and stained hands, but those hands could do the one thing an entire empire could not, and so those hands lifted him higher than gold ever could. The proud one measured people by their money, and lost everything. The humble one measured his own days in honest work, and gained a name that the whole town spoke with pride. Now I would love to hear from you. Here is my one question for you tonight. Did Gloria deserve to lose everything she had? Or should the town have shown her the same mercy she never once showed Nero? There is no easy answer, and I truly want to know what you think. Please share your thoughts in the comment section below, because we read them, and we love to hear your hearts. Another moving story is coming to this channel very soon, so if this one touched you, please subscribe. turn on the notification bell, give this video a like, and share it with someone who needs to be reminded that kindness and honest work are never wasted. Thank you so much for watching and for your kind heart. We will see you again in the next story. This story is fictional and made only for entertainment and to share a moral lesson. All names, characters, places, and events come from imagination, and any resemblance to real people or real events is purely coincidental.